Hello everyone, Joy here, and today's video, well, I'm going to be making some pretty bold statements, and unfortunately it's not a happy topic that I'm talking about, but it is an important one, and unfortunately the more I researched this, the angrier I got. So fair warning, that might happen to you too. What am I talking about? Kiera Bell is a liar. Kiera Bell is a detransitioning woman who, basically that means female to male back to female, who brought a legal case against the NHS in the UK, specifically Tavistock, the gender clinic, for being given puberty blockers. Her claim's a little bit weird because she's telling people that it was under the age of 16, but there's a source that says that she was 16 at the time. The court ruled against giving teens under 16 puberty blockers, and it is now nearly impossible for someone to get that treatment. I read a clinical research review of puberty blockers, how they work in trans teens and trans people in general, and well, I'm going to share with you some screenshots and some highlights from that, because if we're going to talk about puberty blockers, we need to know exactly what we're talking about. How do puberty blocking medications work? GnRH analogues, or puberty blockers, are a synthetic form of the human body's GnRH hormone. When taken regularly, GnRH analogues work by suppressing the secretion of luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormone. These are the two hormones that stimulate the testes to produce testosterone and the ovaries to produce estradiol. Testosterone and estradiol are responsible for the changes that occur during puberty. For approximately the past 30 years, these same medications have been successfully used to treat precocious puberty with few side effects identified. The impact on sex characteristics is, when started in the early stages of puberty, tenor stages 2 to 3, GnRH analogues prevent additional changes in primary and secondary sex characteristics. When started in middle to late puberty, tenor stages 3 to 4, most of the existing changes will not reverse. GnRH analogues are a fully reversible intervention because once the medication is stopped, the biological changes of puberty resume as they would have if puberty blockers were not used to delay the process. In contrast, other aspects of gender-affirming medical care are typically only partially reversible, i.e. cross-sex hormones, or irreversible, i.e. top and bottom surgeries. GnRH analogues also prevent other changes associated with puberty, including growth spurts and increases in bone density. Research has also shown that delays in bone density generally reverse after puberty is resumed or cross-sex hormones are administered. Fertility considerations. If puberty blockers are taken for a period of time but then discontinued, they do not appear to impact future fertility. So basically, when we say completely reversible, that's what we're talking about. The effects of puberty blockers being completely reversible if someone stops taking them. Many transgender identified individuals do not experience physical dysphoria strong enough to seek gender-affirming procedures. For those that do, research has consistently found that gender-affirming procedures are effective at eliminating or significantly reducing physical dysphoria, and rates of regret are very low, about 1.5%. Now, it's important to note here that Kiera Bell is in that 1.5% of regret rate. It's also important to note, however, that we're going to understand a little bit about why the puberty blockers are instrumental in easing the changes of gender-affirming procedures. Typically, a multidisciplinary team helps guide decisions regarding whether or not to recommend hormone blockers. Several criteria guide the recommendation. Constant gender dysphoria, often beginning in childhood, e.g. cross-sex identity that results in distress or impairment in functioning. This is typically documented via the diagnosis of gender dysphoria according to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM-5. Presence of physical dysphoria and an increase in dysphoria related to pubertal changes. Lack of major mental health concerns that interfere with the ability to assess gender dysphoria, and adequate social support and knowledge of how puberty blockers work, including their impact on fertility and social relationships. Note, consent to treatment is required from both the adolescent and parent or legal guardian. Once puberty blockers are started, adolescents are seen for follow-up care every 3 to 6 months. Regular meetings with all members of the multidisciplinary team assists in the monitoring of each adolescent's gender identity development, physical dysphoria, and overall functioning. Why not wait to see if gender dysphoria resolves during or after puberty? Preliminary research suggests that when strong and consistent physical dysphoria is present, delaying treatment is linked to higher rates of depression, anxiety, eating disorders, and suicidality. In addition, it is more difficult to align the body with one's affirmed gender once physical changes in secondary sex characteristics occur. For both affirmed males and females, puberty blockers followed by cross-sex hormones helps to prevent the need for top surgery and produces a final height and body frame more in line with the affirmed gender. These outcomes cannot be accomplished by only using cross-sex hormones. In light of the irreversible changes that occur during puberty, specialists who work with transgender adolescents emphasize that wait-and-see approaches are not neutral responses to persistent gender dysphoria. Also, it's important to note that by the age of 16, most of the effects of puberty have already happened, rendering puberty blockers largely ineffective, especially like in reversing any of those pubertal changes, but they will prevent further ones from happening. And that is something that we need to take into consideration when looking at this case, because the cutoff age here we're looking at is 16. That brings me to my conclusion. Kiera Bell is a liar. Or more to the point, she has exaggerated the link between puberty blockers and her own transition. Puberty blockers didn't make her transition. They didn't give her a deep voice, or make her grow facial and body hair, or make her tits chop themselves off. So why is she claiming that prescribing puberty blockers is negatively influencing trans-identified youths? Statistically, most trans-identified youths who take puberty blockers do go on to take cross-sex hormones and undergo other gender-affirming procedures, such as surgeries. But this isn't just a correlation equals causation thing, or one thing leads to another thing. This is because the youths selected to be prescribed puberty blockers are only the most eligible in the first place. They have to be of the correct age, young enough to actually benefit from it. They have to have no other medical contraindications. They have to, be consenting of both themselves and their guardian. And they have to be chosen by the multidisciplinary team, which indicates that they've already shown significant, consistent gender dysphoria with their own bodies. So isn't the most likely explanation then that those children chosen for puberty blockers were actually, what's the word for it? Transgender in the fucking first place? Maybe. Kiera Bell is a liar and a hypocrite. And her court case makes no sense. So, according to a BBC article, she was referred to Tavistock GIDS clinic at the age of 16. At the age of 16, not before. So, maybe the BBC got their information wrong, but that's the information that I'm going with. So that's, what I found. So that's what I have to, work with. So she said after 3 one-hour-long appointments, she was prescribed puberty blockers. She didn't actually mention what period of time those 3 appointments were over, because I'm guessing it must have been about a year. But the court case was arguing on her behalf that minors under 16 can't consent to such treatments, which they should be able to, because the puberty blockers pause puberty not indefinitely. There are virtually no side effects, and the effects are completely reversible, which I've already explained. But if this ruling was in effect at the time that she was prescribed the blockers, and she was already 16 at the time, then it would have made absolutely no difference to her whatsoever. And I'm having difficulty seeing what the point of the 16-year-old cutoff point is. Like, why she's bringing that up as a point in her favour to make her point when it is not. I don't understand. I just don't. A year after starting to take the puberty blockers, she started taking testosterone. A year. She had an entire year to think about it and landed on cross-sex HRT. That's what puberty blockers are for. They aren't transing the children's. They are for giving that person who is using them the time they need to think about it. And if she landed on that decision after a year, that is on her. 3.5 years ago-ish, from the time this video is being published, she had an operation to remove her breasts. And there is no way she could have done all these things without being informed of the irreversible nature of hormones and surgery. There is no way she could have been like ill-informed or misinformed on that. Even if they didn't tell her in the clinics, which they would have had to have told her. It's easy enough to find out what the effects are because everyone posts online what their transitions are going like. According to the article, she felt that there wasn't enough investigation or therapy before she reached that stage. What stage it's talking about is unclear because there's a lot of conflating with transition and puberty blockers, but I think this is still talking about puberty blockers. She says, quote, "I should have been challenged on the proposals or the claims that I was making for myself. And I think that would have made a big difference as well if I was just challenged on the things I was saying." End quote. There is a lot to unpack there. Firstly, it is not the Tavistock workers' jobs to disbelieve their patients. If she went in there and she said, "I'm experiencing these gender dysphoria symptoms," it is not then the clinician's job to say, "Really? Are you really though? Are you really though?" Like, how much pushback is enough? Like, it's patronizing. If someone comes in and says that they have certain symptoms, generally you have to believe that person, because who else is going to just drop into your shoes and figure that out? And at 16, yeah, you are fairly self-aware. Also, if she thinks that there is not enough therapy for trans questioning teens, maybe she should advocate for them getting more help and time to think things over, not less. Kiera Bell is a liar. She says, quote, "Initially I felt very relieved and happy about things, but I think as the years go on, you start to feel less and less enthusiastic or even happy about things." End quote. Well, that means that Tavistock did nothing wrong. If you report feeling initially happy with the results, then great, their job's done. If she felt less good about things later, I'll tell you why I think that is. Because gender transition doesn't magically make your life happy and amazing forever. You know, it's not a guarantee of happiness. Transition effects do very specific things. You know, deeper voice, remove breasts, blah, blah, blah. That does not equate to everlasting happiness. Everyone has issues. Every person has issues, you know? And even if we're talking about being unhappy with those specific results, that's still something that she was reporting was making her happier at the time. She says, quote, "You can continue and dig yourself deeper into this hole, or you can choose to come out of it and have the weight lifted off your shoulder." End quote. Well, isn't she brave? I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. It's not a slippery slope fallacy type thing here, where you start on the blockers and then go to the hormones and then go to the surgery route just because it happens that way. It doesn't just happen that way. Puberty blockers are there to give you the time you need to make the decision, to make the choice which way your body's going to go. Because unfortunately, I learned the hard way, the body cannot do two things at once. Much as I would really like it to. It just doesn't. You have to make a choice. Physically. I mean, the puberty blockers, they pause puberty to give the patient time to choose. And she had the time. She had a whole year to think about it. She says, quote, "I would say it was saving me from suicidal ideation and depression in general. And at the time, I felt it relieved all these mental health issues I was feeling alongside gender dysphoria," end quote. How are the Tavistock staff supposed to interpret that in any other way other than they were doing the right thing? The article also has the opinion from the chief executive of the charity Mermaids, Suzy Greene, who defended the old process being the way it was, as in administering puberty blockers to minors under 16. She said it was based on years of research. She told BBC News that many people who approached the charity were very distressed and that research had suggested that puberty blockers could help reduce rates of self-harm and suicide, which, yeah, the research does in fact say that. We looked at it earlier. And she said it was not proportionate to take away services because of a very small number of people who regretted undergoing medical intervention. Now, I do want to point out that 1.5% out of a population of about 1%, like this is 1% of 1% of a population here. This is a very small number, not insignificant, but it is not worth that tiny minority taking out their frustrations on the rest of that minority. And that is my point. Yeah. Suzy Greene continues, "In the first instance, the waiting time is well over 2 years, and when young people get into the service, there is then a process which takes well into a year before medical intervention is considered," she told BBC News. "The process is very detailed. They get a lot of information about the benefits, the pitfalls, and the projected outcomes of what comes of any kind of medication. So they make informed consent, and that underpins the NHS." So where's the fucking problem, Keira? Oh wait, I forgot. Kiera Bell is a liar. So what does this all have to do with me? Well, I mean, I'm obviously too old to benefit from puberty blockers now. And I've stopped doing HRT and seeking physical transition for now. But this all feeds into the same anti-trans narratives that I am so sick of hearing in this country, especially when it comes to medical intervention. Because I may not need it now, but I might need it in a couple of years' time. It's emboldening the TERFs, giving them fuel for their fire of fucking transphobic narratives They love to call us confused. And Kiera Bell is propping up that stereotype just by going public. And I'm not saying she shouldn't have the right to say these, like, anything, but I am saying that she has now impeded on the, like, rights and the freedoms of others. And that's wrong. That crosses a line. And of course it lends to the UK media just in general moving even further right wing, because they just love to hate us, and it's going to cause even more barriers to entry for physical transition in the future, and it's going to cause a lot of people a lot of stress and heartache in the present. But not only that, I do actually know someone, I'm not going to mention any names, but I know someone who has a, like, gender questioning child who is at the perfect age to start taking puberty blockers, and they recently got the go ahead to do that, and now that's just going to have to stop. And that is a huge blow, not just for that trans child, but for the entire family who has been fighting for this for about 2 years. And it's people like them that are really in the crossfire of all this. So I hope you've learned something from this video. I'm not sure you'd like it much, but it is important to talk about. It is very important to talk about the fact that a lot of people are in trouble in the UK when it really shouldn't have to be that way. And if you've learned anything from this, it's that Kiera Bell is a liar and not to be trusted. Trans children are valid, goddammit. If you report feeling initially happy with the results, then great, their job's done. Oh, shit. You know, it's not a guarantee. In the article, there is also the opinion... The article also has the opinion of the